Now that the Sixers' nightmare of a season is finally over, I thought it would be fun to look back on the year and get my top 5 worst games of the season. This has probably been the most insufferable year I have ever spent as a Sixers fan, and there is a lot about this team to be mad about, so here are the games that made me want to shove my head through a wall the most. Make sure to let me know in the comments section what pissed you off the most about this season, but without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 5, I have their loss to the Memphis Grizzlies on November 20th, the game where the big three of Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Paul George made their debut. They were playing a Grizzlies team without Ja Morant, started the season 2-11, and the fan base desperately needed hope, and what better way to boost morale than to show everyone what the Sixers were capable of when they are fully healthy. Unfortunately, this was one of the worst debuts of a supposed big three in NBA history and ended up foreshadowing much of what would transpire for the rest of the year. Paul George would end up hyperextending his knee in the second half like he did in the preseason, but he only had 2 points in 17 minutes, shooting a dismal 1 for 6 from the field. Even if he was banged up, this game highlighted Paul George's inability to beat anybody off the dribble, and because of this, he was constantly settling for tough shots. This was not just one bad game, as PG would continue to decline as the season went on, but we'll really get into that later in the list. This game was also played when Maxey was still going through a rough start, and he just could not buy a bucket, going 3 for 13 from the field. He and George both combined for 0 for 8 from 3. Joel Embiid had to carry like he always does, but the Grizzlies were torching the Sixers from deep and were exposing their piss-poor perimeter defense. The Sixers were only down 10 at halftime, but just could not gain the upper hand, with the Grizzlies taking over the second half, shooting 12 free throws in the third quarter and not letting the Sixers gain any momentum. The score may not look bad, but the Grizzlies were blowing the Sixers out by 19 until the Sixers went on a 21-6 run midway through the fourth, but it was too little, too late. But what I have at number 4 is a game I'm sure at least some Sixers fans watching this video vividly remember, and it was the one where the Sixers blew a 26-point lead to the Celtics on February 2nd. It's hilarious that the Sixers were even up that big in the first place, given that the Celtics were fully healthy and the Sixers were without Embiid and PG. Boston shot a putrid 33% from the field in the first half and were clanking threes left and right. It's not like the Sixers got off to some hot start and Boston was able to chip away the entire game either. They were up 26 near the end of the third quarter. That was when the Celtics actually started to take the game seriously, and they went on a 41-10 run for the rest of the game. The Celtics clearly did not want to be humiliated on national television, losing to the likes of Justin Edwards and Ricky Council, so they employed a 7-man rotation in the second half like it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Jason Tatum in particular stepped up with 25 second-half points, and the Celtics ended up shooting 63% from 3 in the second half. Most Sixers fans already wrote the season off by then, but after this loss, they would win one more game before going on a 9-game losing streak that would allow them to fully start tanking for real. For number 3, I have their first loss to the Orlando Magic on November 15th, where the Sixers were leading by 8 towards the end of the third quarter, only to go the next 8 minutes without scoring a single point. Even with the 31-10 run the Magic went on for the rest of the game, the Sixers were able to cut the lead down to 4 with 5 minutes left, but 2 clutch threes from Wagner and Suggs put in the dagger. The Magic have built a reputation for playing a slow, gritty style of game predicated on their defense. Their roster is loaded with size and athleticism, with every player who gets significant time in the rotation, except for Cole Anthony being at least 6'4" or taller, and their length and speed made it nearly impossible for the Sixers to score. Nurse's rotations didn't help either, with their decrepit duo of Kyle Lowry and Eric Gordon combining for 44 minutes and just 6 points. This game really showed just how far behind the Sixers have been when it comes to roster construction, constantly having one of the oldest teams in the league year after year for the sake of experience, only for them to get ran off the floor and look like a complete joke whenever they face teams with younger players that can actually jump over a credit card. Paul George and Joel Embiid got locked down in this game, combining for 6 for 20 from the field in 69 minutes played. Embiid went 0 for 7 in the second half, constantly getting swarmed while his knee was clearly bothering him. I forgot to mention that Paolo Banchero did not play in this game, and the Sixers made the Wagner brothers look like Kobe and Shaq. The only bright spot for this game and why it isn't lower on the list is Jared McCain, once again showing that he could be a legit piece for the Sixers' future. He dropped 29 points and 4 assists on 54% shooting while draining 4 threes. Mind you, this was against one of the better defensive teams in the league, yet McCain was able to show off his potential as a spot-up shooter and shot creator. At number 2, I have their pathetic loss to the Sacramento Kings on New Year's Day, where they led for most of the game, only to crumble in the fourth quarter in typical Sixers fashion. They still had the chance to turn the season around, and were coming into this game winning 8 of their last 10. After a great win against the Celtics on Christmas and the overall upward trend the team was heading towards, the hope for a playoff push was still alive. Things were going well for the majority of the game, with Paul George balling out and by far having his best game with the Sixers. He ended up with 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists on a fantastic 55% shooting from the field. The Sixers were on track to secure a 5-game win streak until they hilariously blew a 9-point lead in the fourth quarter. The Sixers have become notorious for playing down to competition and not playing with any urgency, but blowing a decent lead with only 5 minutes left to go is a stunt that would make Doc Rivers proud. They let the Kings go on a 15-0 run, and the Sixers could not score a basket to save their lives. You just kind of had to be watching the game live to understand just how helpless the Sixers looked in that stretch. It was one of the worst collapses I've ever seen from the Sixers, and I watched them blow a 26-point lead in Game 5 against the Hawks in the 2021 playoffs. Despite PG and Maxey combining for 57 points, the Sixers got shredded by the Kings' big three. De'Aaron Fox dropped 35 on 81% shooting from the field, while Sabonis had a near triple-double with 17 points, 7 assists, and 21 rebounds because the Sixers didn't even attempt to rebound the basketball and were playing 6'8" Gershon Yabusele at center, something Nick Nurse wouldn't stop doing for the rest of the season. I put this game over the Magic game because it seemed to have gotten the ball rolling on their eventual transition to tanking. This loss was the eye of the storm for their eventual 7-game losing streak that sunk them further down the standings. In my opinion, it is only right for the worst game of the season to be the one that best encapsulated everything that went wrong with the Sixers this year, from injuries to bad front office moves to flat-out embarrassing performances that will stick in the heads of Sixers fans for years to come. I would not blame you if you did not remember some of the prior games we talked about, but I'm confident that most people watching this will remember and maybe even agree that this was when the Sixers hit rock bottom as a franchise, and the game that represented that best was on February 12th where Paul George, their $200+ million blockbuster signing, whose only expectation was to be better than Tobias Harris, scored 2 points. That's right, 2 points in 36 minutes against a G League Nets roster, setting the internet on fire. I watched all 48 minutes of this game, and it was straight up pure torture. It didn't even make sense for PG to be playing in the first place, given that the season was largely over by then. Paul George himself said that he had to get injections just to play basketball. Neither Embiid nor Maxey played in this game, yet the Sixers still decided to play PG despite it becoming clear as day that he was hurt. The psychopaths, including myself, who decided to watch the entire game, saw Paul George look fried as he spent the first half taking only 3 shots, all of them being contested threes. He would be scoreless until finally hitting a floater in the third quarter. The Sixers would go on to lose the game, but people really didn't care since it was the 5th game in their 9-game losing streak, where the season was already considered a massive failure, but everyone was just slandering Paul George and the front office for even signing him just constantly. It was crazy. For me, it was less about the game itself and more of what it symbolized for the season. Whether he's injured or just flat out washed, Paul George was extremely disappointing for the Sixers, putting up a Tobias Harris stat line, but on worse efficiency. He showed spurts of being the all-star level player Sixers fans thought they would get, but he could just never string together any consistent production on the court, and his horrible outing against Brooklyn served as the straw that broke the camel's back. Although I and most Sixers fans have been extremely critical of Paul George this year, and for good reason, his inconsistency represented broader issues with the team. The Sixers set a record this season with 52 unique starting lineups, and Embiid and Maxey were constantly in and out of the rotation. This doesn't completely absolve Paul George though, as his nonchalant attitude the entire season, combined with fueling the narrative that he actually cared more about his podcast than the Sixers season, was just not a good look. Anyway, I thought I got my point across. Thank you for sticking around this long. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought the worst games were for the Sixers this year, and be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.